What was the Garden of Eden? And as I'm looking at it, and I say, okay, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, right? The tree of knowledge of good and evil. When I hear that, I hear the law of duality, right? The law of duality, one and a two, right? And it seems like it was a choice, and God was trying to explain the choice of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. It was the tree of experience on a spectrum, right? The tree of experience on a spectrum where one side was negative, one side was positive, and the only way you can understand the positive side was to go through the negative side, which is what I think the Bible is about, from the Old Testament to the New Testament, even with God, coming down and, giving the commandments to Moses, picking a people to spread his wisdom and his knowledge. That's what he was trying to explain to Adam and Eve. If you eat from this tree, then you have come into agreement, come into covenant with this experience, to where then this way, the only way you can experience the goodness of God is if you go through the experience of being without God, being held by sin, being held captive by sin, understanding what it is to be out of the presence of God, out of the grace of God, out of the protection of God, to go from, to have to experience it. And this is what the Bible is about. This is what Jesus is about. And I think this is what our earthly existence is about, right? Because if you look, he gave them the law. They couldn't follow the law. He gave them priests, judges, kings, King Solomon, King David, arguably some of the greatest men in history, right, to lead them, and they still could not free themselves from sin, regardless of what God had given them. And I think this is what God was trying to explain to them from the beginning. And two, also, if you eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, right? If you eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, why is death the wage of this tree? Well, because in order for you to have life, you also must have death, because you ate from the tree of the law of duality, the law of opposition, good and bad, right and wrong, negative, positive, life, death. It has to happen. This is the wage of sin. That is the wage of that knowledge. Wow. And that's amazing, right? So when I think of the Garden of Eden, I think it as the construct of reality. They were in the creative space where God created, where they had the ability with God to create reality. And this reality was a choice that they chose. So I got to get back to this workout, but yeah, deep, dope thought.